Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia, September 1842. While most settlers in Oakwood Valley rushed to complete simple cabins before autumn's end, Thomas Hollister methodically assembled river stones into what appeared to be an excessively elaborate hearth foundation. Now in his sixth week of construction, the 42-year-old Pennsylvania carpenter worked with unhurried precision that baffled his neighbors. Frederick Walsh, who had built 17 cabins in the settlement, shook his head as he watched Hollister's slow progress. "That hearth's taking up half your living space," Walsh called out one morning. "You'll regret that come December." Hollister merely nodded and continued laying stones in a pattern that violated every principle of frontier construction. Where traditional hearths occupied 12 to 16 square feet of floor space, Hollister's foundation already sprawled 8 feet wide and extended 10 feet into his cabin's interior. The massive structure would consume 80 square feet, nearly one-third of his modest 18-24-foot dwelling. Colonel James Garrett, the settlement's founder and de facto leader, stopped by daily to observe the unusual construction. A veteran of the War of 1812, with practical experience in frontier development, Garrett had established Oakwood Valley in 1836 with 15 families following principles of efficient resource management and standardized building practices. "Hollister, you're building a monument, not a hearth," Garrett remarked on the 23rd day of construction. "Standard dimensions have served frontier families for generations. What possible advantage justifies sacrificing so much living space?" The mathematical implications of Hollister's design were undeniable. His hearth foundation already contained 2,400 pounds of carefully selected river stone, 5 times the material used in conventional construction. Most settlers completed hearth building in 7 to 10 days, allocating the majority of their time to wall construction and roofing. Hollister had inverted these priorities, focusing first on what most considered a straightforward component. "A proper hearth serves many purposes beyond simple heating," Hollister replied, carefully positioning another 50-pound stone. "My family survived 3 Allegheny winters using a 5-point system learned from Pennsylvania Dutch masons and Iroquois lodge designs." Walsh scoffed audibly at the mention of native building techniques. "Indian methods won't help when Virginia snow piles 6 feet high. You'll have a grand fireplace and nowhere for your family to sleep." Hollister's hearth design incorporated unusual elements that generated further skepticism. The foundation rose to an unconventional height of 5.5 feet, creating what appeared to be a massive stone table rather than a traditional fireplace base. Multiple channels and chambers within the stonework suggested complexity beyond simple fire containment. Elizabeth Porter, who had spent 27 years in frontier settlements throughout Virginia, stopped to examine Hollister's work while carrying laundry to the creek. "My father built hearths in Kentucky for 30 years. Never saw one with side chambers and stone benches." "What exactly are you building, Thomas?" "A system that will cook, heat, and dry clothing simultaneously while using half the wood of standard designs," he replied, pointing to different sections of the structure. "These channels direct heat to specific areas based on need. The stone retains warmth for hours after flames die." The technical specifications Hollister described contradicted accepted frontier wisdom. Standard hearths provided direct heating that required continuous fire maintenance. His design claimed to create differentiated heat zones and extended warmth through stored thermal energy, concepts that struck his neighbors as theoretical rather than practical. As September's unusually cool temperatures hinted at an early winter, the contrast between Hollister's unfinished dwelling and his neighbors' completed cabins became increasingly stark. Walsh had finished 3 cabins in the time Hollister spent on his elaborate hearth alone. "Pride comes before the fall," Colonel Garrett warned, noting the first frost already whitening distant mountaintops 6 weeks earlier than the previous year. "When snow flies, theory gives way to practical necessity." Hollister continued his methodical work, unbothered by growing community skepticism. The massive stone structure taking shape in his cabin represented either frontier brilliance or monumental folly, a question that approaching winter would soon answer definitively. By early October 1842, Hollister's Hearth construction revealed sophisticated engineering that contradicted its rustic appearance. The imposing stone mass now displayed intricate chambers, invisible during foundation stages. As he completed the upper sections, neighbors who had dismissed his approach found themselves reluctantly drawn to examine the unusual design. This central platform maintains different cooking temperatures simultaneously, Hollister explained to Elizabeth Porter, who had stopped to observe his progress. He pointed to a smooth stone surface, extending 4 feet in length. The area nearest the fire reaches 450 degrees for quick cooking, while this outer edge maintains 175 degrees for simmering, all from the same fuel source. The mathematical precision of Hollister's design became increasingly apparent. His hearth contained 5 distinct functional zones: the primary cooking surface, 2 side chambers for bread baking, raised stone benches positioned to absorb and radiate heat, and an innovative drying system incorporated into the chimney structure. Each component represented careful calculation rather than conventional design. Frederick Walsh inspected the baking chambers with professional skepticism. How does smoke not fill these side compartments? Bread needs clean heat. The draft is controlled through these channels, Hollister demonstrated, tracing the airflow pattern through narrow passages within the stonework. Hot air circulates around the baking chambers at 325 degrees without allowing smoke to enter. The Westphalian masons in Lancaster County perfected this technique for community ovens that served 20 families from a single fire. Walsh remained unconvinced. Pennsylvania winters are different from Virginia mountains. Theory doesn't always translate to practice. The contrast between traditional hearth construction and Hollister's approach extended beyond design to building materials. Where standard fireplaces used whatever stone was readily available, Hollister had carefully selected each piece for specific thermal properties. Sandstone with high heat retention formed the cooking surfaces, while granite-lined fire-facing areas for its resistance to cracking under extreme temperatures. Colonel Garrett brought Jeremiah Blackwell, a visiting engineer from Baltimore, to examine the unconventional hearth during the 3rd week of October. Blackwell walked slowly around the structure, measuring proportions and examining air passages with professional curiosity. "The concept is sound," Blackwell acknowledged after his inspection. "These stone benches will indeed absorb heat during active fires and release it gradually for hours afterward. However, maintaining proper draft through all these channels requires precise construction tolerance, typically found in industrial rather than frontier applications." Hollister demonstrated his solution for this challenge: movable dampers crafted from cast iron that controlled airflow through different sections of the system. Each zone can be adjusted independently based on immediate needs. During cooking, heat concentrates here, he explained, pointing to the central platform. "For evening warming, these channels redirect heat to the benches where my children will sleep." The technical challenges Hollister had overcome became evident through detailed examination. Traditional single-chamber fireplaces managed basic heating through simple containment, while his integrated system required balancing thermal dynamics across multiple zones. Each modification to improve one function potentially compromised others, requiring holistic engineering principles rarely applied to frontier construction. As November approached, the completed hearth stood ready for practical testing. The massive stone structure now incorporated a functional chimney, cooking surfaces, baking chambers, drying racks positioned to capture rising heat, and seating areas designed to store thermal energy. The 2,400 pounds of carefully arranged stone represented 7 weeks of dedicated labor, time Hollister's neighbors had spent completing entire cabins. "Winter comes early this year," Colonel Garrett observed, noting frost patterns extending further down the mountainside each morning. We'll soon see if your Pennsylvania Dutch and Iroquois knowledge translates to Blue Ridge conditions. Hollister nodded calmly, arranging kindling for the hearth's first official firing. Theory becomes practice when properly applied, he replied, striking flint against steel to ignite the inaugural flame that would either validate his approach or confirm his neighbor's skepticism. November 1842 brought the first sustained freeze to Oakwood Valley, providing initial testing conditions for Hollister's unconventional hearth. The morning temperature dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, leaving frost on cabin roofs and frozen water in outdoor buckets. While neighbors hurried to stoke fires in standard fireplaces, Hollister began a systematic evaluation of his integrated heating system. The temperature gradient across the cooking surface shows remarkable consistency, Hollister noted, recording measurements in a leather-bound journal. Using a brass thermometer borrowed from Colonel Garrett's collection, he documented temperatures ranging from 350 degrees at the center to 175 degrees at the outer edge of the cooking platform. This precise range allowed simultaneous preparation of different foods requiring varied heat levels. Elizabeth Porter arrived with a basket of bread dough during the second week of testing. Frederick says your fancy oven will either burn bread black or leave it raw inside, she remarked, accepting Hollister's invitation to test the baking chambers. The side compartments, heated indirectly through stone conduction rather than direct flame exposure, maintained steady temperatures between 325 and 340 degrees, ideal for bread baking. This is better than my mother's brick oven in Williamsburg, Porter admitted 2 hours later, removing perfectly browned loaves from the chamber. The bread showed even cooking throughout, without the scorched bottoms common in direct heat ovens. This practical success generated the first positive response from the settlement community. The system's efficiency became measurable during extended testing. Standard hearths in neighboring cabins consumed an average of 50 pounds of firewood daily to maintain basic heating. Hollister's design required 35 pounds, despite providing additional functionality beyond simple warming. The stone mass, once heated to full capacity, continued radiating warmth for 6 hours after the fire reduced to embers, 3 times longer than conventional fireplaces. The heat storage follows predictable patterns, Hollister explained to Jeremiah Blackwell, who had extended his visit to observe the system's performance. These stone benches reach 85 degrees during active firing and maintain temperatures above 75 degrees for 4 hours afterward. My children will sleep comfortably without requiring overnight fires. A rainstorm during the third week of November demonstrated another practical advantage of Hollister's design. While neighbors struggled to dry clothing inside smoke-filled cabins, Hollister's family utilized the integrated drying racks positioned within the chimney structure. The racks captured rising heat without exposure to smoke, drying 6 sets of clothing in under 2 hours while simultaneously cooking dinner on the main platform. Your system works in mild cold, Frederick Walsh conceded after observing these results. But wait until real winter hits these mountains. December winds find every weakness in fancy designs. Walsh's skepticism reflected broader community sentiment. Initial successes with cooking and clothes drying represented convenience rather than survival necessity. The true test would come during sustained freezing conditions when heating adequacy determined frontier survival. Colonel Garrett maintained professional neutrality while documenting the system's performance for his settlement records. Theory meets reality when temperatures fall below zero, Garrett noted. The mathematics of your design show promise, but frontier survival relies on practical function during extremes, not averages. Despite persistent skepticism, neighboring families began accepting Hollister's invitations to utilize his cooking surfaces during inclement weather. The spacious platform accommodated multiple pots simultaneously, allowing 3 families to prepare meals together when outdoor cooking proved impossible during November rainstorms. Hollister continued refining the system based on operational data. He adjusted airflow dampers to improve heat distribution between cooking and heating functions. Stone placement in the secondary chambers underwent minor modifications to eliminate temperature variations. These adjustments reflected the transition from theoretical design to practical application based on real-world conditions. I'll wager 2 cords of split oak that your fancy fireplace fails during the first blizzard, Walsh declared publicly during the settlement's Sunday gathering. When December storms hit these mountains, we'll see who's sleeping warm and who's rebuilding their complicated contraption. Hollister accepted the wager with quiet confidence, knowing the true validation of his design awaited nature's most severe challenge. The early winter temperatures had demonstrated basic functionality, but frontier innovation required proving itself under the harshest conditions these mountains could deliver. December 23, 1842, brought catastrophe to Oakwood Valley in the form of an unprecedented winter storm. Snow began falling at dawn, accumulating rapidly as temperatures plummeted. By midday, the settlement faced blizzard conditions with temperatures dropping to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest in local memory. Howling winds created 6-foot drifts between cabins as settlers struggled to maintain basic survival conditions. Frederick Walsh abandoned his cabin after 24 hours of futile heating efforts. Despite continuous feeding of his conventional fireplace, interior temperatures dropped below freezing. Water froze in cooking pots within 3 feet of his hearth. His family arrived at Hollister's door, nearly frostbitten, seeking emergency shelter as their own home became uninhabitable. "The porter's cabin is down to 15 degrees inside," Walsh reported, stamping snow from his boots as he entered Hollister's dwelling. "Their firewood is nearly gone from trying to keep up with the cold." The mathematical realities of conventional heating during extreme conditions became starkly evident. Standard cabins required hourly stoking to maintain temperatures barely above freezing, consuming firewood at unsustainable rates. Most families had exhausted half their winter wood supplies in just 36 hours of crisis heating, with months of winter still ahead. Within 48 hours, 3 families had taken refuge in Hollister's cabin. The Walshes, Porters, and Millers, 13 people total, joined Hollister's family of 7, creating living conditions that would normally overwhelm a frontier dwelling of 432 square feet. Yet Hollister's heating system demonstrated remarkable capacity to accommodate this unprecedented demand. The central hearth maintains 62 degrees consistently, Hollister noted, documenting performance during the 3rd day of continuous operation. While conventional cabins struggled to reach 40 degrees, even with constant fire maintenance, his integrated system provided comfortable warmth throughout the dwelling, despite outdoor temperatures remaining below 15 degrees. The multifunction capabilities of Hollister's design proved crucial during the extended crisis. The cooking platform served 20 people simultaneously, with different zones allowing various food preparation without requiring separate fires. The baking chambers produced 32 loaves of bread daily, providing essential sustenance when outdoor cooking became impossible. The drying system processed wet clothing continuously as men returned from necessary outdoor tasks covered in snow. "We'd be burning furniture by now in my cabin," Walsh acknowledged on the 4th day of the blizzard. His professional skepticism dissolved in the face of undeniable performance data. While his own carefully designed fireplace had failed within 48 hours of extreme conditions, Hollister's system operated efficiently under triple its expected capacity. Colonel Garrett arrived on December 27th, leading his family through snowdrifts that had rendered their cabin dangerously cold despite continuous fire maintenance. The settlement leader had maintained his conventional fireplace according to established frontier practices, yet found himself seeking refuge in the dwelling he had previously criticized as impractically designed. "The mathematics speak for themselves," Garrett conceded, documenting the system's performance in his official settlement records. Hollister's hearth consumes 1/3 cord daily, while heating 20 people in comfort. Our standard designs burn twice the wood, while barely maintaining survival temperatures for 5 people. The operational data during peak crisis revealed the fundamental superiority of Hollister's approach. His integrated hearth maintained cooking temperatures between 350 and 175 degrees across different zones, while heating stone benches to 85 degrees for sleeping areas. The drying system processed 4 sets of clothing hourly without affecting cooking functions. Most impressively, the entire system required precisely scheduled firing for only 8 hours daily, maintaining residual heat through stored thermal energy during reduced operation periods. By December 30th, as the blizzard finally subsided, the contrast between Hollister's cabin and the abandoned dwellings throughout the settlement told a compelling story of innovation versus tradition. 20 people had survived in comfort while consuming approximately 1/5 the firewood per person compared to conventional heating methods. No one under Hollister's roof suffered frostbite or exposure-related illness, while 3 settlers requiring separate shelter developed severe respiratory infections. Your Pennsylvania Dutch and Iroquois methods have proven themselves beyond questioning, Walsh acknowledged as families prepared to return to their own cabins. I owe you 2 cords of split oak and an apology for my skepticism. Hollister accepted both with characteristic quiet dignity. The crisis had demonstrated that frontier survival required practical innovation rather than rigid adherence to established methods, a lesson the entire Oakwood Valley settlement now understood through direct experience rather than theoretical argument. January 1843 marked a fundamental shift in Oakwood Valley's approach to frontier heating. The transformation began with methodical knowledge transfer sessions as Hollister responded to community requests for instruction in his integrated hearth design. Settlers who had once ridiculed his approach now gathered in his cabin 3 evenings weekly to learn principles that had proven life-saving during the December crisis. Stone selection determines thermal performance, Hollister explained during the first technical session. He displayed various rock samples collected from the region, demonstrating how to identify optimal materials through simple tests. Sandstone with these layered patterns stores approximately 0.2 BTUs per pound per degree, while granite provides superior structural integrity for fire-facing components. Frederick Walsh, once the settlement's most vocal critic, became Hollister's most dedicated student. The experienced builder meticulously documented construction techniques that contradicted his 20 years of traditional fireplace design. His professional transformation reflected broader community recognition that established methods had failed under extreme conditions. The draft calculation must account for multiple chambers operating simultaneously, Walsh noted, developing mathematical formulas that balanced airflow between cooking, baking, and heating functions. A conventional chimney pulls straight up, but this system requires precisely controlled cross-ventilation through adjacent chambers. By mid-January, practical implementation began throughout the settlement. 7 families undertook modification of existing hearths, while 4 newer arrivals planned complete installations following Hollister's design. The adaptation process revealed creative variations as settlers applied fundamental principles to their specific circumstances. Colonel Garrett organized a community-wide hearth improvement project, allocating settlement resources to support rapid implementation before another weather crisis could threaten survival. His military logistics experience proved valuable in coordinating material acquisition and labor sharing that accelerated adoption of thermal mass heating throughout Oakwood Valley. The measurable benefits justify immediate action, Garrett reported during the settlement's monthly meeting. Preliminary data shows modified hearths reducing firewood consumption by 42%, while improving interior temperatures by 18 degrees under identical conditions. These efficiency improvements represent significant survival advantages in frontier conditions. Elizabeth Porter documented health improvements associated with the heating innovations. Her records showed respiratory complaints decreasing by 63% in cabins with modified hearths, while chilblains and cold-related circulation problems virtually disappeared among families using integrated heating systems. The consistent temperatures eliminate the freezing-thawing cycle that damages lung tissue during winter months, Porter explained to the settlement's women during their weekly gathering. Children sleeping on heated stone benches maintain body warmth throughout the night without requiring dangerous overnight fires. The economic benefits became increasingly apparent as winter progressed. Families with modified hearths reported spending 15 fewer hours weekly gathering firewood, time redirected to productive activities including tool repair, leatherworking, and food preservation. This increased productivity during winter months, traditionally a period of reduced output, created measurable improvement in overall settlement prosperity. Walsh's professional transformation proved particularly significant for regional adoption. Having built fireplaces throughout Western Virginia for 2 decades, his endorsement of Hollister's methods carried credibility that theoretical arguments alone could never achieve. His modified designs began appearing in new construction throughout neighboring settlements by February. The integrated system functions as a community center rather than mere heating, Walsh observed while completing his third hearth modification. When multiple families gather around a properly designed thermal mass hearth, cooperative activities naturally develop around its different functional zones. This cultural shift represented perhaps the most profound change initiated by Hollister's innovation. Frontier settlements had traditionally emphasized individual cabin sufficiency, with each family responsible for its own survival resources. The multifunction hearth created natural gathering spaces that fostered communal cooking, resource sharing, and collective problem-solving during harsh winter conditions. By February's end, 14 of Oakwood Valley's 22 cabins featured either modified or fully integrated thermal mass heating systems. The community had transformed from skeptical resistance to enthusiastic adoption in less than 60 days, a remarkable shift in frontier construction practices typically characterized by conservative adherence to established methods. The principles make mathematical sense once properly demonstrated, Colonel Garrett acknowledged during a community gathering in Hollister's cabin. What appeared as wasteful overbuilding in September has proven itself essential technology for mountain survival. Sometimes innovation requires seeing beyond established wisdom to recognize superior approaches. Hollister accepted this validation with the same quiet confidence he had shown during months of skepticism. His perseverance in the face of community doubt had created a foundation for widespread improvement in frontier living conditions, proving that practical knowledge derived from multiple cultural traditions could surpass conventional methods when properly integrated and applied. The legacy of Hollister's innovative hearth design extended far beyond Oakwood Valley in the decades following its introduction. By 1852, the Hollister hearth had become a recognized architectural element throughout Appalachian settlements from Pennsylvania to Georgia. Government surveyors documented 137 installations across 5 states, noting the design's adaptation to various regional conditions and requirements. The Frontier Development Commission's 1852 report specifically highlighted the economic impact of thermal mass heating on settlement sustainability. Communities employing multifunction hearth systems demonstrate 37% reduction in winter fuel consumption compared to settlements using conventional designs, the report stated. This efficiency translates to approximately 2.8 fewer acres of forest cleared annually per household, a significant conservation of natural resources. Thomas Hollister himself continued refining his original design until his death in 1865. His later innovations included a water heating reservoir integrated into the side chambers that provided continuous hot water without dedicated heating fires. This addition further reduced fuel consumption while improving hygiene conditions during winter months, when outdoor water access became limited by freezing conditions. Frederick Walsh became the primary disseminator of Hollister's techniques throughout Virginia and North Carolina. His practical construction manual, Integrated Thermal Systems for Frontier Dwellings, published in 1848, translated complex principles into straightforward building instructions, accessible to settlers with basic masonry skills. The manual sold 1,200 copies in its first printing, spreading standardized construction techniques across regions where personal instruction remained impractical. The quantifiable benefits of Hollister's approach became increasingly documented through systematic record keeping. Settlements adopting integrated hearth designs reported winter survival rates 22% higher than comparable communities using conventional heating during particularly harsh winters between 1845 and 1860. These survival improvements reflected both reduced exposure-related illness and decreased structure fires resulting from safer heating methods. Cultural anthropologists later identified the Hollister hearth as a catalyst for community development throughout the Appalachian region. The multifunction design naturally created gathering spaces that fostered cooperative activities during winter isolation. Settlements featuring widespread adoption showed measurably higher rates of cooperative economic enterprises, shared educational initiatives, and communal problem-solving approaches, compared to communities maintaining individual-focused survival strategies. Regional variations emerge as the design spread across different geographical areas. Southern Appalachian adaptations featured expanded drying capacity essential for tobacco processing, while northern versions emphasized maximum heat retention through additional stone mass and smaller ventilation channels. These modifications demonstrated how fundamental principles could be adapted to specific regional requirements while maintaining core functionality. By 1870, Oakwood Valley had grown from 22 original cabins to a thriving community of 68 dwellings, all featuring variants of Hollister's heating system. The settlement's reputation for winter resilience attracted immigrants specifically seeking improved survival prospects during harsh mountain conditions. Winter productivity exceeded regional averages by 42%, creating economic advantages that supported population growth beyond typical frontier development patterns. The technical legacy extended into standardized architectural education by the 1860s. Engineering schools in Philadelphia and Richmond incorporated thermal mass principles derived from Hollister's work into formal curricula, legitimizing traditional knowledge that had previously been dismissed as unscientific folk practice. This academic recognition represented the full-circle transformation from ridiculed frontier experimentation to established professional standard. Colonel Garrett, in his final settlement report before retiring to Richmond in 1857, provided perhaps the most significant assessment of Hollister's contribution. The transformation of heating technology in Western Virginia settlements demonstrates how practical innovation often emerges not from established institutions, but from individuals willing to challenge conventional wisdom with observable results. Hollister's integration of Pennsylvania Dutch, Iroquois, and personal experimental knowledge created a heating approach superior to anything previously developed in European or American traditions. The ultimate validation came through unconscious linguistic evolution within frontier terminology. By 1870, settlers throughout the Appalachian region referred to central heating installations simply as Hollisters, rather than hearths or fireplaces. This linguistic transformation, a man's name becoming the standard term for an everyday object, represented the highest form of recognition frontier culture could bestow upon an innovation that had fundamentally improved survival prospects throughout the harsh mountain regions of Eastern America. What began as one settler's unconventional approach, mocked by neighbors convinced of their traditional wisdom's superiority, ultimately transformed frontier architecture across multiple states. Thomas Hollister's quiet persistence against community skepticism created a legacy that continued improving lives long after the original critics had acknowledged the mathematical reality of his superior design.